The fighter that terrorized the Pacific in 1941, with a 12-to-1 kill ratio, ended the war with 95 out of every 100 pilots lost. How did a legend of invincibility become a flying coffin in just 3 years? The shocking answer lies in a brutal design paradox, where every strength hid a fatal flaw and every victory planted the seed of disaster. Here is how dominance unraveled for Japan's Zero. December 1941, the skies over the Philippines became a proving ground for the Zero's reputation. Japanese naval squadrons launched wave after wave of sorties, over 1,000 in the first week alone, escorting bombers and sweeping aside Allied defenses. At Clark Field, Iber and Nichols, American P-40 fighters scrambled to intercept, only to be outmaneuvered and shot down in minutes. Pilots reported Zeros twisting through the air with impossible agility, turning inside Allied fighters and striking from above or behind before vanishing into the clouds. Within days, nearly all of the Far East Air Force's pursuit squadrons were destroyed, with over 80% of their fighters lost, many on the ground, and the rest in hopeless dogfights. Japanese records credited the 11th Kokutai alone with almost 90 kills in the first month, while their own losses barely reached double digits. The scale of defeat forced Allied commanders to issue stark new orders. On December 10th, a directive warned, "Do not dogfight with the Japanese Zero." The message was blunt. P-40 and P-35 fighters could not match the Zero's turning ability, and pilots were told to attack only if they held a clear speed or altitude advantage. Reports from the front described Zero pilots performing acrobatics in mid-combat, taunting survivors before finishing them off. By mid-December, the Japanese enjoyed nearly uncontested control of the air. It opened the way for ground invasions across Luzon and beyond. The myth of Allied air parity in the Pacific had collapsed almost overnight. It was replaced by a new reality, one where the Zero's dominance seemed absolute. The Zero's supremacy began in the design room, where Japanese engineers made a radical bet. Every ounce saved meant tighter turns, longer range, and better odds in combat. The result was a fighter so light it could outmaneuver anything in the sky. It was pure agility. Fully loaded, the Zero weighed just over 6,100 pounds, nearly half the mass of its American rivals. Its wing loading was among the lowest of any frontline fighter, allowing pilots to throw the plane into sharp, sustained turns that no P-40 or Wildcat could match. The Zero's climb rate, topping 3,100 feet per minute, let it intercept bombers before they reached their targets and re-engage at will. But agility was only part of the formula. The Zero's range rewrote the rules of Pacific warfare. With over 1,600 miles on internal fuel alone, it could escort bombers far beyond the reach of Allied defenders, launching from carriers or island bases deep in enemy territory. This endurance meant Japanese strike groups could appear where they were least expected, hitting targets hundreds of miles from home. Firepower matched its reach. Twin 20mm cannons, each with 60 rounds, delivered a punch that shredded Allied aircraft in seconds. Two 7.7mm machine guns backed up the cannons, making the Zero lethal in both head-on passes and turning fights. Its top speed, 331 miles per hour, kept it competitive with early war opponents, but it was the combination of speed, firepower, and unmatched agility that gave the Zero its early edge. Every technical choice, from lightweight structure to powerful armament, translated directly into battlefield dominance. Every edge the Zero gained from its featherweight design came at a hidden cost. Japanese engineers stripped away anything that did not improve speed or maneuverability. That meant no armor plate behind the pilot's seat, no bulletproof glass, and most dangerously, no self-sealing fuel tanks. American fighters like the P-40 or the Wildcat could take a hit and keep flying. For a Zero, even a single .50 caliber burst in the right spot could rupture a fuel tank and ignite the entire plane. Survivors described seeing stricken Zeros burst into flames almost instantly, the magnesium-rich skin feeding the fire. By 1942, Allied pilots had started calling them Flying Zippos, a grim nickname that spread through the Pacific. The Zero's light frame, so nimble in a turn, offered no protection when the shooting started. For pilots, every mission became a gamble. The trade-off was clear: unmatched agility in exchange for a cockpit that could turn into a fireball with one lucky hit. The Zero's greatest strength had become a lethal flaw, and the price would be paid in pilots' lives. The Zero's greatest flaw was never just its thin skin or explosive fuel tanks. It was the slow, grinding loss of the men who knew how to fly them. In the battles of Coral Sea, Midway, and Guadalcanal, Japan's most experienced naval aviators, men with 500 to 800 hours of rigorous pre-war training, fell in disproportionate numbers. The Zero's agility was a weapon only in the hands of pilots who understood its limits and could dance at the edge of disaster. By 1943, the ranks had thinned so badly that replacements arrived with barely 100 to 200 hours in the cockpit. By 1944, many new pilots had 50 hours or less, just enough to take off, barely enough to land, and nowhere near enough to survive a dogfight. Unlike their American counterparts, Japanese pilots had no rotation system. They flew until they were killed. Saburo Sakai, one of the few surviving aces, later wrote of watching boys with 50 hours sent up against veteran Allied flyers. The Zero, once a legend in the hands of masters, became a coffin for the inexperienced. In July 1942, a single Zero crash landed on Akutan Island in the Aleutians, its airframe mostly intact. U.S. Navy salvage crews recovered the fighter and shipped it to North Island in San Diego, where engineers and pilots from the Bureau of Aeronautics began a series of secret test flights. Over 24 sorties, Lieutenant Commander Eddie Sanders pushed the Akutan Zero to its limits, documenting every quirk and flaw. The tests revealed that the Zero's ailerons locked up in high-speed dives, making rolls sluggish above 200 knots. Sanders noted the aircraft rolled left easily, but struggled to the right. Negative G maneuvers caused the engine to sputter, an Achilles heel Allied pilots could exploit. Armed with these findings, Lieutenant Commander John Thack developed a new tactical doctrine. Instead of turning with the Zero, American pilots would fly in pairs, weaving back and forth to cover each other's tails. The Thack weave, first tested in combat at the Battle of the Eastern Solomons, allowed slower Wildcats to survive encounters that once meant certain death. By understanding the Zero's limits, U.S. pilots turned knowledge into survival and began to claw back control of the Pacific skies. Grumman's answer to the Zero was brute force and battlefield logic. The F6F Hellcat carried a 2,000 horsepower Pratt & Whitney engine, nearly double the Zero's output, and tipped the scales at over 15,400 pounds loaded. Instead of 2 light cannons, the Hellcat mounted 6 50 caliber machine guns, each with 400 rounds, delivering a wall of fire in a single pass. Armor plate shielded the pilot, and self-sealing fuel tanks could soak up hits that would have turned a Zero into a fireball. The Hellcat's design was not about winning a turning contest. It was built for boom and zoom, dive from altitude, strike fast, and climb away before the enemy could react. In a dogfight, the Zero still had its tight turn, but the Hellcat's speed, firepower, and sheer toughness gave American pilots the edge to survive, attack, and return for another fight. June 1944 brought the largest carrier battle in history, and the breaking point for the Zero. Over the Philippine Sea, American Hellcats tore through Japanese formations, downing more than 600 aircraft in 2 days. Nearly all were Zeros, most flown by barely trained pilots. The carnage was so one-sided that United States aviators called it the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. By the end of the campaign, the Imperial Japanese Navy had lost the heart of its remaining air power. The Hellcats' tally reached 5,223 enemy aircraft destroyed, the vast majority Zeros. With no hope of matching American production or pilot training, Japan turned to desperation. The Zero, once a symbol of technical mastery, was now loaded with bombs and sent on one-way missions. Kamikaze orders issued in the fall of 1944 made clear that survival was no longer expected. The fighter that had ruled the Pacific was now a tool of sacrifice, its legend ending in fire. Warfare rewards adaptation, not nostalgia. The Zero's fate warns, what dominates today can vanish tomorrow if doctrine and design stand still. Modern air combat still punishes yesterday's strengths when they become today's weakness, and every new legend risks the same fall. What would survive the next reversal?